My talk today, as you may have seen, is saying no to negative alien hybriding and adultery, a command to take back women's reproductive womb power on Earth. So I will be kind of taking that apart and helping us understand what it is. I just want to invite everybody to shift gears a little bit and if you will, just close your eyes for a moment. Take a couple of deep breaths. Feel yourself in your bodies against Mother Earth. Feel your feet, your fingertips, and your toes. Just breathing and coming really into this now moment, releasing the past, releasing the future, being in the eternally unfolding now. And as we're doing this, just see that you're setting protection of golden light with love all around yourself, all around our group that's watching live and in replay. And we are calling on the authentic Holy Sophia Christos beings of true love, light, and wisdom to be with us, around us, including Yeshua, King Arthur, the authentic Archangel Michael, the protector being Betula, and the Mary priestesses, Mother Mary, Magdalene, and Mother Mary's sister, Mary Paragita. We're asking them to surround and protect us as we speak and listen and on into the future. So taking a deep breath in and out, and I invite you now to open your eyes. So I know this is kind of an intense talk, and I just wanted to mention that at the end, I'm going to leave you with a tool for working with it, managing it, feeling it protected, and also a gift to process what I'm going to be sharing, as well as a couple of offerings to anchor yourself in your wise love, which I see as the answer to everything I'm talking about today, so that you're not just going to be left spinning with the information I'm presenting. And so the genesis of this talk, when I got this invitation, I just came out with this outlandish title. It's sort of the amalgamation of all of these bits and pieces in this arena that I've been talking about for years, all in one compact talk. And the reason why I feel this is important is that I'm noticing that the womb is missing from too many discussions and channelings related to the topic of interdimensional beings engaging in the hybriding of the human form, going back deep in history. And this is assuming some background understanding on your part. And if you're new to this, you can start investigating this topic and just take in what you can of what I'm talking about here today. So the womb is missing from that big ancient, telescopic history, as well as the more recent disclosure discourse about abductions and experimentation by whatever you want to call them, extraterrestrials, ultra-terrestrials, etc., on humans. And so what I'm seeing is that a lot of that through these discussions and these channelings, we're being introduced to beings who are kind of genetic scientists, and they're generally male and depicted as kind of lab technician gods of reality. So I've learned that the human womb and the cosmic womb, Mother Divine's holy universal womb, are the most sought after places that negative interdimensionals infiltrate in order to carry out their hybriding agendas. This is not just stuff that happens in, matrix labs and so forth. All right. It involves ideally the use of the human and the cosmic and the divine goddess wombs to carry out what Oracle Lisa Renee and others are calling forced breeding programs. And so in the case, let's say, of Zeus, many of us are familiar with this ancient so-called god. I have learned that he is basically an Anunnaki reptilian hybrid. And his story of swallowing the pregnant Metis and, birthing Athena out of his head shows that all male beings either must attempt to fashion artificial womb receptacles or rape wombs in order to give birth to their seed. And this takes place on both human woman level and goddess level, cosmic goddess. There always needs to be some kind of chamber or pod. And these beings know that because they contain and are all about organic life and DNA, the authentic cosmic womb and her multiple fractalized aspects in human women are the best places for these beings to carry out their breeding agendas and genetic manipulation. So let's just take a breath. Talk about a history that has been veiled. In more recent times, this coveting of the human womb in interdimensional experimentations is demonstrated in testimonies of people, maybe some of you watching this, who have been abducted and report having their reproductive material siphoned off and used. Some women report memories of having to care for the beings they've apparently had their wombs used to create. So as I see it, this missing history, this missing information about the importance of the womb in all of this is also part of the hijacking of humanity. So not only are the experimentations and abductions going on, but the veiling of the fact that the human and cosmic wombs are being used is part of this whole agenda. It's important that to these beings that we not see it and understand it. So today is another way of lifting the lid off of this, because the human and goddess wombs are ground zero for infiltration, manipulation, and the carrying out of hybriding, cloning, and transhuman AI agendas. Let's just take a breath here. This infiltration is something we do need to uncover, and we need to not just describe what's happening around it, but to empower ourselves around this so as to turn the Earth ship around in a direction that truly benefits humanity. Women are at the helm of that ship by virtue of the fact that they contain wombs, and our wombs are the gatekeepers of this planet. So how have these understandings developed for me? When I was a child, my father, may he rest in peace, worked for a company called Perkin-Elmer. From 1969, he was there through the mid-70s. When the company was creating the optical chassis for the KH-9 hexagon, code word Big Bird spy satellites, which David Wilcox said in one of his articles in September 2018, quote, "These covert satellites were apparently the communications backbone of the deep state." That is, they were the foundation of planetary surveillance carried out by the cabal and negative interdimensional forces. We did not know what my father was doing. He was an electrical engineer. He couldn't tell us. He had a security clearance. This was a top secret project. We don't really know exactly what else was going on with us and our lives as a result of and in conjunction with this, but I will offer you some other thoughts on that as we go along. For now, let's just fast forward to my 20s when I heard talks by the Harvard psychiatrist John Mack, who at the time was hypnotically regressing people who were reporting astounding experiences of being abducted and frequently having their reproductive material used by what seemed to be gray alien types of beings. When I moved to California in the late 1990s, I met John Mack when he visited his organization there known as PEER, an acronym for something about extraordinary research. And then I was shocked by his sudden death in the UK, apparently by a vehicle who hit him when he, as an American, was looking the wrong way on the street, or so the story is told. That definitely seemed very suspicious to me. I can well imagine how much John Mack was a fly in Harvard University's ointment and a problem for interdimensionals who wanted to keep their doings under the cloak of dark night. When I was in my 30s and in graduate school at the California Institute of Integral Studies, through a flash of insight one fine day in 2001, I had my awakening to the reality of an alternative birthing practice of human women, an alternative conception practice, divine conception as an authentic priestess technology to bring in divine avatars in a conscious way. So I wrote about this in my dissertation and first two books, primarily as it regarded priestesses of ancient Greece doing this practice, but I was noting that it is something that has been worldwide practiced by high-level holy women. My books were published in 2009 and 10, The Cult of Divine Birth in Ancient Greece, and then the second one, Virgin Mother Goddesses of Antiquity, explicate all of this, as does the mystery tradition of miraculous conception, which Alan mentioned earlier. Well, crickets on those books from the academic world, but a good deal of interest from those who were spiritually awakening, with some affirmation about this process going on with some human women I met or came to know about. For example, one of the holy women named Divine Amma of India, this is not Ammachi, but another Divine Amma, was public about her divine conception of her child. A woman pseudonymously named Lori, who was written about in Den Poitras's book, Parthenogenesis, and a few other colleagues along the way. And I began teaching about the history of divine birth in programs and workshops in graduate schools and throughout the esoteric school I founded in 2012, Seven Sisters Mystery School. And this material was met with great interest. So through that research, I discovered on the internet examples of artificial wombs that were being created in lambs, and evidence for cloning projects going on through, for example, a company known as CloneAid. Just today, as of this talk, I looked online and saw an article in Nature's Journal dated September 2023. Human trials of artificial wombs could start soon. Since my research in the early 2000s, I've discovered that research groups have been working on artificial wombs for years. Take a look and see the matrix in action. You may want to put your dragon to guard your Alta Major chakra at the base of your skull. Let's all take a breath. Now, this may be difficult to hear, and take it or leave it, as it is difficult for me to speak about this. I know there are implications for many in our human family. This may not be popular information, and I do this with care and love, but I do feel the need to speak what I've been shown. Around 2013, I began channeling in medicine ceremonies that autistic Asperger's spectrum children were the result of gray alien hybriding experiments that have been allowed to go on since the 1960s at least. In my orbit at the time, I was aware of one child who was quite autistic, and I was shown in that medicine ceremony that he had so many implants in him that should they be removed, he would die. I doubted my oracle information, and I hesitatingly shared this with a friend of the parents of this child. And what did I come to learn? The father had had numerous episodes in his life of waking up unable to move, which is a clear sign of alien abduction. And the mother at night was sometimes spending hours battling interdimensionals through her pregnancies and while the children were little. I then would happen to be in places where out of control autistic children were acting out. And from this, I received the insight that the level of their disturbance was a factor of the level of gray alien DNA within them. And I was given to understand that this project on the part of the grays was owing to them wanting to re-ensoul themselves after having lost their souls through repeated use of reproductive cloning technologies. And they knew the answer of their ensoulment and thus immortality was in the organic DNA of humans. They wanted the bare minimum amount of human DNA to do this, so they were experimenting with percentages in their experiments. The more uncomfortable the children in their bodies, the more dysfunctional as humans they were, the more gray DNA they had. Those with Asperger's have lower levels of gray within them. This is what often renders them scientifically gifted and able to fit into corporate life well, which is a bastion of negative interdimensional programming agendas. Thus, it seems that some of the children were being hybrided to populate the STEM domain, science, technology, engineering, and math, and be cogs to fuel biotech, AI, and other agendas harmful to humanity. Let's take a breath. I came to understand that while most of the breeding pods and hybrided children were held off planet in the 60s through the 90s, after 2000 or so, the experiments had been injected into the human family on Earth. And this is why we see the rise in Asperger's and autism, which many of us over 50 never remember seeing or hearing of in previous decades. In 2017, I took a workshop with Carl Mollison, the channeler, about the extent of negative beings working on our planet and possessing and manipulating humans. And that very same month, I took a course in the Holy Womb Chakra teachings that had been brought to light by the late Hindu saint Sri Kaleshwar. These teachings, taken from the ancient palm leaf manuscripts of India and elsewhere, show the tremendous power of the wombs of human women and Mother Divine writ large, and the need to clear the womb space of unwanted energies so that we can return our powers to ourselves as women and as a human family. And following these incredible downpours of information in early 2018, I began having reptilian realizations, perhaps memories, about the clash of the sexes among these beings, that their sexual intercourse could degenerate into the phallic sword and the vagina dentata if one or more of these beings was angry with the other at the time of the intercourse, and that the queens of the reptilian domains were the winners in this, and the males went marauding around the universe, coming to planet Earth to steal sexual energy, as well as interweave themselves further genetically into the human family through conception rites of the elites. And awakening within me was a general sense of rage about womb tampering. Now, a few years ago, I told my psychic mentor about my father having worked in PerkinElmer. And what did she tell me in that monumental session, a woman I had been working with for at least 6 or 7 years? She said, my father worked for PerkinElmer too. It turns out, in a very synchronistic encounter, that both of our fathers worked at that company, overlapping by a year. And both of us were aware of the famous trip to Disneyland in 1969 when we were 7 years old, which it turns out was actually a business trip that our fathers made, taking their wives and some family members in tow. It seems to me that given that the place where these satellites were launched was Vandenberg, now called Space Force Base, then Air Force Base, 3 hours from Disneyland, whatever the case may be, these men must have been going to that Air Force Base as part of the business trip. My father did confirm with me before his death that it was a business trip. My mentor and her brother went on that trip, but I did not. My brother did not. And I attribute that trip to the beginning of a recurring nightmare I had in which I was killed for defying a very powerful and threatening man. Well, I began investigating what PerkinElmer had been doing. And it turns out they declassified that Hexagon Big Bird spy satellite project in recent years. But I realized that my mother, who'd had lupus since she was a teen, died within weeks after she and my father took a vacation to Montauk, Long Island. Now, Carl Mollison, the channeler, gave me a reading, and he said, you know, the synchronicity of you and your psychic mentor both having fathers who work for this company is the writing of Creator in the sky. And he read for me that I had been abducted as a child and that my eggs were used in off-planet breeding pods, and that I was taken to go up and see these beings and be asked to give them some nurturing. I do not have a memory of this. All I have is an overwhelming rage at the thought of womb hijacking by interdimensionals. Is that rage my smoking gun? Carl said that my father was too inquisitive and remained on the conventional level of this Hexagon spy satellite rather than the secret space program level at PerkinElmer. My mentor has other stories of what her father told her, however, Carl says that the trip to Montauk was coincidental and had nothing to do with my mother's death, despite the fact that there is a well-known programming torture center in Montauk. But my mentor's mother also died before her father did, and we wonder what toll it took on these women to be married to men who were taking home top secrets they could not share. Over the last few years, I've been studying the work of Lisa Renee and Indigo Angel, among others, and I have learned from them about the extent of forced breeding programs in every dimension, reality, and timeline, making the gray alien abduction of humans look like a kid's coloring book version of what has been going on. A few years ago, I learned that the daughter of a friend was pregnant for 3 months and then suddenly was not pregnant. Apparently, this does happen to women. I asked the mother if she believed in aliens, and she began telling me of at least several encounters she and her family had of seeing ships. So it seems that these shenanigans are now involving impregnating the women and then simply stealing the fetuses. And this is so outside of what most people can comprehend that despite ultrasounds attesting to the presence of the fetus and its disappearance, they in the medical establishment somehow explain this away in their minds. This year in 2023, as I was preparing for teaching my 7 Mysteries of Magdalene course, I dove again into the apocryphal gospel material, sometimes known as Gnostic, and I found Jesus talking about adultery. When I bore into what the term means, I found Jesus' exact quote in the Gospel of Philip, quote, "Every act of sexual intercourse between those unlike each other is adultery." Just prior to that quote, he says that Cain and Abel, Cain was birthed through adultery on the part of the murderous serpent archon or ruler. And other Gnostic sources say that this serpent seduced Eve, this archonic reptilian serpent seduced Eve, and this produced Cain, who then brought in murder into the early human family, murdering his brother Abel. So this means that adultery is the consorting of non-human entities with human women for forced breeding of their harmful seed on the planet. We have come to refer to adultery as sexual relating among those not married on the human realm under the morality guise that married people should not mix, right? 2 things that should not mix. But this is but a metaphorical reference to the original meaning of 2 different interdimensional species, or an interdimensional species relating with humans, beings who are raping, seducing, and impregnating humans. So what I now understand is that Jesus was referring to the interdimensional sexual and crossbreeding travesties happening long ago. In the Testament of Reuben, we have the Watchers who turn themselves into human males and sexually cavort with human women, which resulted in the problematic birthing of the giant beings known as the Nephilim. So these giant Watchers committed adultery with human women, and the Nephilim were born. And this story also appears much earlier in Genesis 6, 1 through 4, where the interdimensional beings who impregnate human women are referred to as sons of God. And the Nephilim are mentioned in that same breath with the implication that they are the children of such unions. And this kind of consorting, adultery, was the origin of the concept of sin, and it was understood to violate cosmic law for good reason that we are all living with the consequences of now.